claw closed around empty air, and that was the first sign that something had gone very wrong. I am Vesic, and I have hunted across 11 worlds. My name is known in every corner of the Ossuary Guild, spoken with the kind of respect that takes centuries to earn. That night, on an abandoned station orbiting a dead moon, my name meant nothing at all. We were 3 hunters sent after a single target. A human woman, traveling alone, marked in our files as easy work. No weapons listed, no military record, no warning of any kind. Our broker called her a soft target, the kind of job elite hunters take just to stay sharp between real contracts. Voro moved first, because Voro always moved first. He was the fastest hunter I had ever trained beside, faster than creatures 3 times his size, faster than anything that had any right to survive an encounter with him. He crossed the cargo bay in less than a second, claws extended, aiming to grab rather than kill, because he wanted to sell her alive to a collector who paid well for rare specimens. She was not where his claws landed. I want to describe exactly what I saw, because it still does not make sense to me, even now. She did not dodge the way frightened prey dodges, in that clumsy, lucky way that sometimes saves a life by accident. She moved like she already knew where his claws would end up, like she had studied hunters faster than him and understood exactly how much room they needed to strike. Her hand came up with a small blade, the same one she had been using to clean her nails a moment earlier, and Voro folded to the ground before his claws had even finished closing. He did not make a sound. There was no time for that. Grethus broke the silence after that, and in 300 years of working beside him, I had never heard that particular tone in his voice. It was not fear. It was recognition, arriving far too late to matter. She is not what the file said, he said. She is something else entirely. He did not get to finish that thought. I will not describe what happened to Grethus in detail. I will only say that he wore the heaviest armor in our entire Eastern Division, armor that had turned aside weapons fire from ships built to tear through steel. None of it mattered. She moved through his defenses the way water moves through open fingers, not by breaking them, but by understanding, with terrible clarity, exactly where they had gaps. I stood frozen for 1 heartbeat too long, and 1 heartbeat was all it took. When I came back to awareness, I was on the floor of the cargo bay, and she was crouched in front of me, studying my face the way someone studies a puzzle they have already solved. "You picked the wrong moon," she said. "This station is not abandoned. It never was." I asked her, because even a defeated hunter wants to understand his own defeat, what she meant. She told me the station was used as a training site, a place where certain human units tested new recruits against outside threats nobody back home would ever hear about. She told me her name was Nora, and that she had spent 4 years in a division that pulled people out of collapsed reactors and wrecked ships, the kind of place where a single mistake meant nobody came home. She told me the file our broker gave us was designed to look soft on purpose, bait wrapped around a blade. I asked her why the guild had never heard whispers about a moon that swallowed elite hunting parties whole. She smiled, and there was no cruelty in it, only a kind of tired patience. "Because the ones we catch," she said, "do not usually get the chance to tell anyone." She let me live. She said someone needed to carry the truth back, or the next contract would simply send more hunters, and more after that, an endless line of arrogant predators feeding a moon that had already proven it did not need to be fed. I left that station with one truth burned into me. We had not found prey that night. We had found out, in less than a minute, exactly what our own arrogance had mistaken for weakness. That was 7 years ago. I tell this story now, in every hunting hall from one end of the guild's territory to the other, because arrogance never seems to learn from a single lesson. It always needs a second one, and this time, the second lesson did not happen on a quiet training moon. It happened on a battlefield that mattered. The guild sent a new contract 2 years after my defeat, this time not for a lone hunter testing recruits, but for an entire human outpost stationed near the edge of contested space. The outpost was called Ridgeline 6, a small research colony that had grown into something larger without anyone outside noticing. Command believed it held valuable technology, something they wanted taken quietly, without alerting the wider human military. They chose a strike team of 12 hunters this time, led by a commander named Draith, who had heard my story and dismissed it as an exaggeration born from wounded pride. He believed one dangerous woman did not mean an entire species deserved caution. He believed numbers solved every problem that skill alone could not. I was not part of that team. I had been quietly reassigned after my failure, kept at the edges of guild business, trusted with records instead of missions. But I heard everything that happened at Ridgeline 6, because the survivors could not stop talking about it, even years later, even when nobody wanted to hear it anymore. The plan seemed simple enough. 12 hunters would land under cover of a communication blackout, move through the colony's outer perimeter, and secure the research labs before anyone inside could send a warning. Drath expected light resistance, a handful of unarmed scientists, a few tired security guards, nothing that should slow down 12 of the guild's most capable hunters. What they found instead was a colony that had spent years quietly preparing for exactly this kind of attack. The first hunter to enter the perimeter fence triggered a silent alarm nobody had detected during scouting. Within seconds, the outpost's lights shifted from a soft evening glow to a focused, clinical white, and figures began moving through the colony with a speed and coordination that Drath's team had not planned for. At the center of that response was a woman named Clara, the colony's head of security, a person whose file back at the guild described her only as an administrator, someone who filed reports and organized supply schedules. That file, like the one written about Nora years earlier, had been designed to hide exactly how dangerous she was. Clara did not fight the way individual hunters expect prey to fight. She did not run, and she did not panic. She moved through her own colony like she had rehearsed this exact scenario 100 times before. Because she had. Every corridor funneled attackers into narrow choke points. Every door led into rooms built with hidden defensive positions. Every light that flickered on was a signal to someone else in the colony, coordinating a defense that had clearly been built over years, waiting patiently for a night exactly like this one. Drath split his team into 3 groups, still confident that numbers alone would overwhelm whatever resistance the colony offered. He was wrong within the first 10 minutes. The first group, moving toward the research labs, found the corridors sealed behind reinforced doors that had not existed on any blueprint the guild had purchased. When they attempted to force their way through, they triggered a countermeasure that disabled their equipment instead of harming them directly, a choice that later hunters would realize was deliberate. Clara's colony did not want dead attackers filling their halls. They wanted captured ones, alive enough to answer questions afterward. The second group, moving along the outer wall, ran into Clara herself, along with 3 colonists who moved with the same unsettling calm she did. These were not soldiers by profession. They were engineers, teachers, and farmers who had spent years training quietly, preparing for a threat they always suspected might come from beyond their own world. Every hunter who faced them that night later described the same feeling, a mixture of confusion and disbelief, watching ordinary-looking people move with a precision that should have belonged only to specialists. By the time this second group realized how badly they had underestimated the colony, half of them had already been captured, restrained by equipment clearly built for exactly this purpose. The remaining hunters retreated in confusion, unable to understand how 12 of the guild's best had been reduced to survivors within the first 20 minutes of an operation that was supposed to take less than an hour. Drath, leading the third group personally, finally understood the truth I had already learned 2 years earlier. This was never a soft target. It never had been. Every human file the guild trusted had been built to hide exactly how prepared these people were, wrapped in the appearance of ordinary life so predators would walk willingly into a trap built specifically for predators. He tried to call a retreat. The order came too late for most of his team. Clara found him near the colony's central square, standing alone after his remaining hunters had scattered or been captured. She did not attack immediately. Instead, she studied him the same way Nora had studied me years earlier, like someone confirming a theory they already believed to be true. "You came here expecting easy prey," she said. "That mistake always cost the same price. You just did not know the price yet." Drath demanded to know how an entire colony had prepared so thoroughly for an attack nobody outside the guild even knew was coming. Clara's answer, when the surviving hunters finally repeated it back at guild headquarters, spread through every hunting hall within weeks. She told him humans had learned long ago that the universe did not reward comfort. Every species that assumed safety was permanent eventually lost that safety to someone else. Humans had decided, generations earlier, that they would rather over-prepare for threats that never arrived than under-prepare for the one that finally did. Colonies like Ridgeline 6 were built with that lesson at their foundation, quiet on the surface, layered with defense underneath, ready for exactly the kind of arrogance the guild had just walked into. Drath did not return to the guild the same commander he had been before that night. The survivors of his team spoke less about their defeat and more about the unsettling calm every colonist carried, the sense that this had never been a surprise to them at all, only a scenario they had rehearsed until it became instinct. That mission became the second lesson the guild refused to fully absorb. Some hunters argued it proved humans were simply better prepared in isolated pockets, unusual exceptions rather than a pattern worth fearing broadly. Others, quieter voices, began to wonder if every human world hid the same kind of readiness beneath ordinary surfaces, waiting for anyone foolish enough to test it. I might have stayed one of those quiet voices, ignored at the edges of guild business, if not for what happened 3 years later, during an encounter I witnessed with my own eyes, rather than through second-hand reports. By this point, the guild had grown cautious around human contracts, though caution did not mean the contracts stopped entirely. Greed rarely listens to caution for long. A new opportunity appeared, this time involving a human transport ship carrying what our intelligence described as a small, lightly protected research vessel traveling between two colonies. The ship was called the Northlight, and according to every scrap of information the guild gathered, it carried only a skeleton crew and minimal defenses. I was assigned to this mission specifically because guild leadership wanted someone who had already learned the hard lesson twice, someone who might notice warning signs others would miss. I did not expect to enjoy that assignment. I did not expect, either, that it would finally teach me something worth carrying forward, rather than something worth merely surviving. Our team boarded the Northlight expecting to find frightened researchers and outdated security systems. Instead, we found a ship that had clearly anticipated exactly this kind of intrusion, though not in the aggressive way Ridgeline 6 had. The Northlight's defense was quieter, built around patience rather than confrontation. The ship's captain, a man named Elliot, greeted our boarding party not with resistance, but with an unsettling calm that immediately reminded me of both Nora and Clara. He did not raise an alarm. He did not attempt to fight. Instead, he invited us, almost politely, to explain exactly what we believed we were doing aboard his ship. I recognized the pattern immediately, though my fellow hunters dismissed my warning as the nervous caution of someone who had already been humbled twice before. They pressed forward, confident that a calm captain meant a captain without options. Elliot allowed them to search 2 decks of his ship before revealing what those 2 decks had already told him. Every hunter who entered had been quietly monitored, their movements recorded, their capabilities measured against a database Elliot's crew had built from previous encounters with exactly this kind of hunting party. The Northlight, it turned out, was not simply a research vessel. It was designed to study threats like ours, gathering information under the guise of vulnerability, so that future encounters could be handled with precision rather than panic. When Elliot finally spoke to the hunters directly, he did not threaten them. He explained, in the same calm tone Clara had used with Draith, that humanity had learned to survive not through overwhelming strength in every single encounter, but through patience, observation, and preparation that never advertised itself openly. He told them the era of viewing humans as easy prey had ended quietly, without announcement, long before the guild had ever noticed the shift. I watched my fellow hunters finally understand what I had understood years earlier on that first station, though this time the understanding arrived through words instead of defeat. Elliot did not need to demonstrate the same overwhelming skill Nora or Clara had shown. He simply needed to reveal how thoroughly humanity had already studied us, long before we ever thought to study them. Our team retreated from the Northlight without confrontation, carrying nothing except the same lesson I had carried away from that first station years earlier, now confirmed a third time in 3 very different ways. Humans did not present themselves as dangerous, because danger, when advertised, invites challenge. They presented themselves as ordinary, patient, quiet, right up until the moment ordinary stopped being a useful disguise. I returned to the guild after that encounter, and requested something I never expected to request. I asked to speak before the full council, the gathering of every senior hunter and commander who still made decisions about which worlds the guild considered safe to approach. I told them my story from the beginning, the failure that started everything, followed by the 2 lessons that came after, each one proving the same pattern in a different shape. Some in that council still refused to listen, convinced that isolated incidents did not represent an entire species, but enough hunters had now heard enough stories, from enough different worlds, that the pattern became impossible to entirely dismiss. Files describing human targets as soft or unprotected began receiving closer scrutiny before any contract moved forward. Brokers who oversold weak targets found their credibility questioned in ways it never had been before. I do not know if the guild has fully learned this lesson even now. Old habits fade slowly, and greed has a long memory for convenient assumptions, but I know that I have learned it completely, carried in the same certainty as my own name. We did not encounter prey on that first station, or at Ridgeline 6, or aboard the Northlight. We encountered a pattern, repeated 3 times across 3 very different circumstances, each one revealing the same quiet truth beneath the surface. Humanity had decided, long before we ever arrived, that appearing harmless was often safer than appearing strong. and that the moment danger finally showed itself would be a moment entirely of their own choosing rather than ours. I carry that truth now everywhere I travel, repeating it in every hunting hall willing to listen, because I believe every hunter who still dismisses it is one mistake away from becoming the next name added to this same growing list. Vesic, defeated on a quiet station. Draith, humbled at Ridgeline 6. An unnamed team, turned away quietly from the Northlight. Each name added not because humanity sought conflict but because we sought them first, certain of an easy victory that never actually existed anywhere outside our own overconfidence. The universe is full of predators who assume they understand their prey completely before the encounter even begins. I was one of them, once. I learned, through loss rather than wisdom, that the most dangerous thing any hunter can face is not strength displayed openly, but strength that chooses, deliberately and patiently, to remain hidden until the exact moment it no longer needs to be.